Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to go over all the documents that you need and all the qualification that you must meet in order to be able to apply for Ontario Health Card. I'm also going to show you how to fill out the application for Ontario Health Card and where you can access the application later in this video. So just bear with me. Before we actually start going over the documents that you must have and the qualification that you must meet, I need to let you know that if this is your first time applying for Ontario Health Card, you must apply in person. You cannot apply online. You must apply in person. You have to go to a Service Ontario location with your documents and application. And then when you're at the Service Ontario location, they will take your picture and they will mail your Ontario Health Card to the address that you state on your Ontario Health Card application. So you just need to know that if this is your very first time applying for Ontario Health Card, then you must do it in person. You cannot apply online. So let's begin going over the documents that you need in order to apply for Ontario Health Card. I have already included the link for this page as well as this page right here in the bio. You can just go ahead and click on the link in the bio to access these pages. So let's go over the documents that you need in order to get your health card. The first document that you need is a document that shows your immigration status in Canada. You must provide a document that shows what your immigration status is in Canada. If you're a Canadian citizen, you can provide your Canadian passport or any of these documents that are listed here. If you're a permanent resident, you can show your permanent resident card or any of these documents that are listed here. If you're in the process of applying for permanent residency, you can show any of these documents that are listed here, a letter from IRCC that proves you are applying for permanent residency status in Canada. And if you have any other immigration status, you're applying, you're a refugee claimant or you're protected person or you're on work permit or any other immigration status, you can provide any of these documents here. The bottom line is you must provide a document that shows your immigration status in Canada. That's the first document that you need. The second document that you need is a document that shows your proof of residency in Ontario. You must provide a document that proves you live in Ontario. That document can be any of these documents. You can pick any of these documents listed here as a proof of residency in Ontario. You just need one of them. You can either provide your Ontario driver license, or your Ontario photo card, or your utility bill, or your bank statements, or your credit card statements or phone bill. You can provide any of these you can provide one of these documents that are listed here. It doesn't matter which one, you just need one of them. You just need to provide one document that proves you live in Ontario. Now, the next document, proof of identity, this is only if you are not already providing a proof of identity document. So if you're already using your PR card or your Canadian passport and or your driver license, then you don't need to provide a second proof of identity. They are already all considered as proof of identity, so you do not need to provide a second proof of identity document. However, if you are not already providing a proof of identity, if you are not already providing your PR card or your Canadian passport or your driver license or your Ontario photo card, then you must also include one proof of identity. So this is mostly for people who are here in Canada on work permit, and when they're applying for health card, for their immigration document, they're providing their work permit visa from IRCC, and then for proof of residency, they are providing either a phone bill or a utility bill. So they're not including any sorts of proof of identity. In that case, those people must also consider having a proof of identity document, which can be their foreign passport. But again, if you are already using your PR card, or if you're already using your Canadian passport, and or you are already using your Ontario driver license or your Ontario photo card, then you do not need to include a second proof of identity document. You only need one proof of identity document, and as I mentioned before, that can be your passport, that can be your PR card, that can be your Ontario driver license, that can be your Ontario photo card, or any of these documents that are stated here. But again, you only need one proof of identity. You do not need two proof of identity documents. So if your proof of immigration status and or your proof of residency in Ontario already include a proof of identity, then that's good enough. You do not need to provide a second proof of identity. But if neither your proof of immigration status nor your proof of residency in Ontario include a proof of identity, then you must also provide a proof of identity. But keep in mind, you only need one proof of identity document. After you have all the documents, then you can take these documents with the application to a Service Ontario location and apply for your health card. But you need to know that in order for you to be able to actually apply for Ontario health card, you must meet specific qualifications. One of those qualifications is that you must be physically present in Ontario for at least 153 days. That's a must. So you must be at least in Ontario for 153 days in order for you to be able to apply for Ontario health card. You must also make Ontario your primary residence. So you gotta make sure you meet these qualifications in order for you to be able to apply for Ontario health card. The second qualification that you must meet is that you must fall into one of these immigration status. So in order for you to be able to apply for Ontario health card, you must have a specific immigration status. If you are here on visitor visa, you cannot apply for Ontario health card. If you're here and you're a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident or a protected person or in the process of applying to become a permanent resident, then you can go ahead and apply for Ontario health card. If you're here on work permit, then you can only apply for Ontario health card if you are working full-time in Ontario and if you have worked for an Ontario employer for at least 6 months. So keep in mind, this is only for people who are here on work visa. If you are a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident or a protected person or someone who's applying to become a permanent resident, you only have to show that you've been in Canada for 153 days. However, if you're here on work permit, you can only apply for Ontario health card if you are only working full-time and if you have been working for an Ontario employer for at least 6 months. You gotta make sure you meet those two qualifications in order for you to be able to actually apply for Ontario health card if you're here on work visa. So again, in order for you to be able to apply for health card, you gotta make sure you meet these qualifications. First thing, you gotta make sure that you have been physically in Ontario for at least 153 days. And second thing, you gotta make sure that you fall into one of these immigration categories. If you do not fall into any of these immigration categories, you cannot apply for Ontario health card. So make sure you read this section carefully and make sure that you can provide a document that shows that you fall into one of these categories, because if you cannot show a document that shows that you fall into these categories, you cannot apply for Ontario health card. After you're 100% sure that you meet all the qualification. And after you have all the documents ready, then it's time for you to fill out the application and apply for your Ontario Health Card. In order for you to download the application, you can just go ahead and click on this blue link right here. I have already included the link for this page in the bio. But if you cannot access the link for some reason, or if the link is not working, you can just go on Google and type apply for Ontario Health Card. The first link that pops up, this one right here, is the one that you want to click on. It's going to bring you to this page, which again, I have already included the link for this page in the bio. Then you want to go ahead and click on the download registration for Ontario Health Insurance coverage, this blue button right here. It's going to bring you to this page. Then you want to scroll down and you want to go ahead and click on the download button right in front of the PDF version. Right here, go ahead and click on the download button. And then after you download the application, it's going to show you this document right here. Keep in mind that the application is only one page. This is the application. This is the only page that you must fill out. The third page, this page right here, this is just in French. This is basically the same application right here, only in French. You do not need to fill out this part. This is only for people who want to apply in French. You can just ignore it. You don't even have to print this part. This is the page that you must fill out. And again, as I mentioned before, it's only one page long and it's very easy. The first page, this right here, is just the instruction. You don't need to be worried about it. We're going to go ahead and fill out this application together. As I mentioned before, the first page is the instruction. This is the only page that we must fill out. But before we actually start filling out this page, I need to let you know that if you do not have access to a printer and you cannot print this page, then that is totally fine. You can just go to a Service Ontario with your documents, which are your proof of immigration and proof of residency in Ontario. And you want to make sure when you go to a Service Ontario, you ask them for the application for Ontario Health Card. They will give you this application for free, and then you can just fill out the application when you are at Service Ontario. And after you're done filling out the application, all you have to do is to give back this application as well as your document to the representative at Service Ontario, and then they will take your picture and they will send you the health card to your address. However, if you do have access to a printer, I highly recommend you to go ahead and fill out the application at home and print it and take it with you to the Service Ontario location as well as your documents, because that will save you a lot of time. When you go to Service Ontario, they're usually very busy, and if you already have the application and you've already filled out the application, you're gonna get out of there in a few seconds. So it's not gonna take as long as if you don't have the application. If you already have the application, the whole thing is gonna only take a few minutes and you're not gonna spend a lot of time at Service Ontario. Whereas if you don't have the application, then you're gonna spend a lot of time in that place. So if you already have a printer, you want to make sure you print this application, you fill out the application and print it at home so that when you go there, you don't have to spend a lot of time at the Service Ontario location. You just have to wait in line, give them the application as well as your documents, and then they will take your picture and you can just go home. That's it. It's going to be that simple. Whereas if you don't have the application, then you have to wait in line, then ask for the application, then you have to stand on the side, fill out the application, and then after you're done, then you have to go back to the representative, give them the application, give them your document, then they will take your picture and then you can go home. So the process is just going to take longer. But if you don't have a printer, then that's what you can do. But if you do have a printer, I highly recommend you to go ahead and fill out the application ahead of time so that you do not have to spend so much time in the Service Ontario location, and you can just be out of there in no time if you already have the form filled out and printed. We're gonna go over the application together. As you can see, as I mentioned, this is the only page that we have to fill out. And as you can see right here, it says that if you are new or returning to Ontario, complete sections A, B, and C. So for the sake of this video, we're gonna say that we are new to Ontario. So we gotta go ahead and complete sections A, B, and C. Section A, it's asking for last name. I highly recommend you to type everything in capital letters to make sure that there won't be any confusion. I'm just going to go ahead and type everything in capital letters. First question is last name. I'm going to go ahead and say it's Ross. Then it's asking for first name. I'm going to go ahead and say it's Music. Then it's asking for middle name. If you have a middle name, you want to include it here. If not, you can just leave it blank. Then it's asking for gender. I'm going to go ahead and pick my gender. Then it's asking for date of birth. The year is 1966. Month is, I'm going to go ahead and say November. And the day is 03. Then it's asking for official language preferences. I'm going to go ahead and pick English. Next question, have you ever had an Ontario health number? This is only for people who are returning in Ontario. As I mentioned before, for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that we are new to Ontario. So the answer to this question will be a no. If you answer yes to this question, if you're returning to Ontario, you want to go ahead and include the number, your health number that they gave you before here. If you don't have it, just leave it blank and let them know that you don't have it. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and say no. I have never had an Ontario health number. Then it's asking for home telephone number. You can just include your cell phone number here. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and include my cell phone number here. Then if you have a second phone number, like your workplace number or any other phone number, you can include it here. If there's an extension, you can include it here. If you don't have a phone number and there's no extension, you can just leave these parts blank. Then it's going to ask for your mailing address. This is very important because they are going to, Service Ontario will mail your health card to the address in this section. So it's very important that you are entering the right mailing address because the health card will be mailed to this address. So make sure you double check this address to make sure everything is right. If you're living in an apartment, you want to include the apartment number here. If you're not living in an apartment, just leave that part blank and move on to the street number and a street name. I'm going to go ahead and say I live in a house. The address is 47 Victoria Park Avenue. City is Toronto. Province is Ontario. Postal code is L1L 1L1. Country is Canada. Then it's asking for residence address. If your residential address is the same as your mailing address, you can just leave these parts blank. You don't have to answer any of these sections and move on to this section right here, date moved to this address. If your residential address is not the same as your mailing address, you want to go ahead and include it here. Keep in mind, your health card will be mailed to the mailing address that you're providing, not the residential address if the residential address is different from your mailing address. So again, the health card will be mailed to the mailing address, not the residential address if that's a different address. For the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and say my residential address is the same as my mailing address right here. So I can just leave these parts blank and I don't have to type my address or answer these sections again. I can just leave them blank because they're the same. Then the next question is date moved to this address right here, which again is the same as my residential address, and that's why I didn't include it here. I'm gonna go ahead and say that I moved to this address in 2024, December 1st. Then we can move on to section B. Section B is asking, where did you move from? So they want to know your last residential address. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I used to live in Turkey, and I'm going to go ahead and include my residential address from Turkey that I was living at before I move to my new address. So I'm going to go ahead and say my previous address was 32 Istanbul Drive. The city was Istanbul. The province was Istanbul. The country was Turkey. Then it's asking, when did you leave the above address? I'm going to go ahead and say I left the above address on 2024, November 20th. Then it's asking, when did you arrive to Ontario? I'm going to go ahead and say I arrived to Ontario in 2024, November 21st. Next question, when did you take up permanent residence in Ontario? I'm going to go ahead and say the same date that I arrived to Ontario. My goal was, from day one, my goal was to leave and work in Ontario permanently. And since I was a permanent resident and I came here on PR card, from day one, I took up permanent residency in Ontario. And then it's asking, how long do you plan to live in Ontario? I'm going to go ahead and pick the option for permanently. Then the next question is, if you moved from another part of Canada, were you covered by a government health plan? So this is only for people who were living in Alberta or other provinces like Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and they have relocated to Ontario recently. As I mentioned, for the sake of this video, I'm going to say that I'm a new immigrant to Ontario. So the answer to this question for me will be a no. However, if you have relocated from another province to Ontario and you were covered by a government plan, you want to go ahead and say yes to this question and include your health number that the other province gave you here. But again, for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm a new immigrant, so the answer for me will be a no. Then the next question is asking, are you a Canadian citizen returning to Canada? No, I am not. Next question is, so when it comes to these two questions, are you an immigrant returning to Canada or are you a new immigrant? You only have to answer one of them and you don't have to answer both. So for example, if you are not a returning immigrant, you can just ignore it. You don't have to check either of the boxes. You don't have to say no. You can just leave the boxes blank and then you can move on to this question and answer this question. Are you a new immigrant? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. If you try to answer both questions, it will not let you. If you are filling out this application online, then the system doesn't let you answer both questions. Because when you try to answer both, as you can see, the check mark automatically disappears by itself when you try to answer both questions. You can only answer one of them and you gotta ignore the other. So if this applies to you, you wanna go ahead and answer this question. If this doesn't apply to you, then you wanna ignore it and just go ahead and answer this question. But as you can see, the system doesn't let you to answer to both questions. You can just ignore the question that doesn't apply to you. In this case, this is the question that doesn't apply to me, so I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to ignore it. And I'm just going to go ahead and answer this question that applies to me. If you're filling out this application on paper, then you can definitely answer both questions. You can just go ahead and say no to this question and yes for this one. It doesn't really make any difference, but I don't know, for some reason the system doesn't let me answer both, which again is not a big deal. You don't need to be worried about it. If you're filling out on the paper, you can answer it. If you're not filling out on the paper, you can just ignore it. Then the next question is, have you recently left the Canadian Forces? No. Next question, have you recently been released from a federal penitentiary? The answer is no for me. Next question, are you the spouse or dependent of a regular force member of the Canadian Forces? Again, that's a no for me. Are you a reservist returning from an out-of-country posting? Again, that's a no for me. The next question is, are you a spouse or the dependent of a reservist currently deployed by the Canadian Forces into active service? The answer is a no for me. Then we can move on to Section C. Section C is very easy. All you have to do is to sign and date the application and let them know that the applicant is the one who's signing the application. So you want to make sure you check the box right in front of the applicant, right next to the applicant, and then you want to go ahead and date the application and sign this part right here. If you are filling out the application online, you will notice that this section has automatically been filled for you. But if you're filling out the application on the paper, then you got to make sure you date the application yourself. And you also want to make sure you sign the application. So after you're done with this application, you can just print it and go ahead and you can just print it and go ahead and sign the application right here. If you're using an iPad like me, then you can sign the application right now before you print it. That's your choice. Regardless, you just got to make sure that first you sign it and then you date the application if there is no date already. And that's how easy it is to fill out the application for Ontario Health Card. Again, when you're done with this application, then you want to take the application with your documents, which are again your proof of immigration status and your proof of residency in Ontario, to a Service Ontario location, and then you can apply for your Ontario Health Card. Hope this video was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and like.